Welcome to the What to Read Next podcast. In this podcast, your host, Lori Amin, will interview published authors to chat about their work, journey to getting published, and their book recommendations. If you share a passion for books and always looking for your next read, then join us. Hi, Brina. Welcome to What to Read Next podcast.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
So happy to have you here. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
I am a Northern girl transplanted in the South. I live in North Carolina. And so I've been here a while, so I've sort of adopted the, natural slang. So every once in a while you'll hear me saying y'all. I've been writing for about 10, 12 years. I actually started under a different name, and I wrote like Regency romance, historical romance, and all my friends, I was in RWA in the beginning, and all my local friends wrote romance, historical romance. And so I got really into doing that. And then a few years ago, I realized, I think maybe this isn't my genre. And so I made a big switch. So yeah, I've been really enjoying doing that.
So I got a question. So what came first? Was reading romance first, or was it writing romance? Like, which one came first?
I was definitely reading. Yeah, I started reading romance. I'm 43 now. Mm-hmm. I started reading romance. I think I was pregnant with my second son. So I was like 28, 29. Mm-hmm. And it was just one of those things where you get like an obsession. And I had always read my entire teen years since I was a kid. I was really, really into like sci-fi fantasy, especially epic fantasy, but sci-fi fantasy. And it didn't occur to me until I started reading true genre romance that I've always read romance. Mm-hmm. I have always gravitated towards the sci-fi fantasy books that had a romance arc in them. And if they didn't, I'd get bored about halfway through and wander off. So yeah, I've been reading romance forever, but I picked up my pen, so-called, and started writing about 10, 12 years ago. About 13 years ago. So
what kind of romance do you read? Which ones do you gravitate? Do you gravitate to historical or just general, like a little bit of everything?
I go through cycles. So for sure, I go through cycles. Right now, I am deeply in my romcom cycle. One of my favorite books of, I think it was either early this year or it was very late last year, is Boyfriend Material by Alexis Hall. Oh my God. It has everything you could want from a rom-com. I've been reading a lot of like Rosie Danon and Casey McClinton, and oh my gosh, I'm blanking, Ruby Lane. I love Ruby. And there are so many good, Alicia Rye, there are so many good like rom-coms out right now, contemporary rom-coms. But I actually started reading Alicia way back when her books were a little bit hotter and more contemporary. I feel like they're still hot, but like, yeah, they were spicy.
They were spicy. Yes,
they're spicy. Yes,
I know. It's like a TikTok commercial. It's like spicy romance for you. You're like,
yeah, exactly. But yeah, and then I'll cycle through like YA romance and contemporary romance. I was on a historical romance kick for so long when I first started reading romance because that was where I first dove in. Mm-hmm. And it was actually Sarah McLean's 9 Rules to Break When Romance and Rape. It was actually her book that finally like pushed me, really inspired me to start writing. So yeah, it's just so good. It's so much fun that I was like, I kind of want to try this. So yeah.
And you wrote a rom-com, well, a retelling. What is a rom-com retelling a little bit?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. It's a modern retelling of Anne of Green Gables. And I made it I say I made it into a romantic comedy, but really if you read Anne of Green Gables, especially the first one, it's really funny. Like Anne Shirley is hilarious, especially when she's a kid. Oh my God, the level of drama. So she's just really, really funny. My younger son says she's extremely extra. But yeah, no, I just sort of turned into a rom-com, if that makes sense. I just sort of wrote it, and then my editor was like, yeah, I would say this is a romantic comedy more than a contemporary romance. And I'm like, oh, cool. All right. I hope I'm funny, I guess.
Yeah, I think it was funny, but it was like a think imagining and in Manhattan, like going to grad school and like going through the stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, there were a lot of changes that I had to make, obviously, to update it for modern. And I mean, it's kind of like, how do you can't really improve on Ellen Montgomery's work. You really can't. So you just have to kind of retell it in a different way. Because I would never say like, I perfected it. There's no way. You just can't do that. But you can tell it in a different way, in a different story, inspired by the same characters. So like a lot of authors are doing with Jane Austen. Yeah, I just try to imagine like, what would it be like if, Anne and the gang were in New York City now? And just kind of went from there.
So how was the process of finding your voice, as you reimagine the story? Because it's probably like you have the canon text, so like this is what's supposed to be, here's the beats and here's stuff, but then it's like how to reimagine, like, retell the story and like finding your voice that's like just separate from the original canon text, but still has the essence of it,
Well, I'm really lucky because I took a break. I came to sort of like fandom late, right? So I didn't really understand that's what it was when I was younger, because I mean, like I said, I'm old. So, like we didn't really have terms too much in the mainstream, like fandom and ships and things like that when I was younger. But I mean, there were fandoms. It just didn't necessarily have like a mainstream definition to them. But I came to fandom sort of late, and it was after historical romance when I was writing that, and I kind of stalled out. And I had a few years there where I couldn't seem to write anything. And then I got really, really into the Marvel movies and Marvel comics and other comics. And I was like, hey, why don't I try writing some fanfic? So I did, and I wrote and posted fanfic on Archive of Our Own, and I kind of honed my fandom chops there. So when it came to writing Anne of Green Gables, I already had the experience of stepping into a world that wasn't mine. It was like playing on somebody else's playground. So I already had that experience of trying to find the balance between my voice and an established character's voice. And I think it helped too that I am an absolute obsessive Anne fan. And it's obnoxious how much I could probably talk about the original books. So, so I think that helped quite a bit.
Yeah. I love this. Yeah, I think it's like it. I think writers who come from fandoms and fanfic and stuff like that, they have like, I think, the playfulness about it. There's like a sense of like, it's a playground. Like, let me just play around with these characters. Let me make them my own at the same time. Like, still keeping some of the essence of what the readers are expecting. But let's take them. Let's be more edgy. Let's try something different.
Yeah, and I think also my year spent. It was probably about 2 years or so exclusively writing fic. I was not producing anything. And before, when I was writing historical romance, I was indie hot. So it was all my own. I had never subbed anywhere. I had never tried to get an agent. I just, a lot of my friends were in that first wave of indie pub. And it was like this big crest as you went into it. I think it was like 2012, 2013. Yeah. So I caught that wave, which was awesome. And I rode that one for a while. But then, I kind of just burnt out a little bit thinking this is my genre. So I had about 2 or 3 years where I wasn't writing anything for publication, and exclusively fanfic. And I think I also got used to what I love about fanfic is that a lot of authors can write in diversity that isn't there in the original work. And so that's something I think I got used to doing. And that was like you said, I mean, I guess you would call it, some people would call it edgier. I know that a lot of people are not thrilled how much I changed some of the characters of the relationships. Like I've heard some complaints, but on the other hand, I'm hoping that other people are enjoying the change and sort of understanding, the original works were written in a pretty much all white community in 1918, and they reflect that. It was a very Christian white community that Ellen Montgomery came from, and it was what she knew and what she wrote. And I just don't think that would have worked for a modern retelling. So, and a very straight, or at least implied straight community. Yeah. I don't know. I always had my doubts about Matthew.
I love this. So what was the process of like going for traditional publish, since you were indie and then you did fanfic and like now like you did like like all the stuff that gets you in traditional publish?
Well, it's actually a really crazy story, and I love telling this story. My editor is Tessa Woodward at HarperCollins. She's awesome. And I had followed Tessa for a while on Twitter, but she didn't follow me. She didn't know who I was, I'm sure. And one day she was tweeting and she was saying, for a manuscript wish list, you know what I'd love to see? And her handle, by the way, is Tessa Avonlea on Twitter. So right there. Yeah, huge fan. So she was tweeting out, she was like, I would love to see a modern Anna Green Gables story come across my desk. She's like, I don't know, something like, Anna Manhattan. And I was like, oh my God, I would love that. I would love to read that. And I said, what if it was like, I don't know, longtime rivals, and they go to grad school and they're going head to head at grad school in the city or something. And it's this like rivals to lovers. And she tweeted back and she goes, I would love to read that too. Can you write that for me? And I was like, obviously, yes. Obviously. So, but it took me a while to even get her the summary, just because I had been working on something else. And I really didn't know how truly serious she was. Like, I had never had an interaction like that with an editor. And then she came back a couple months later and said, hey, how's it going? And I was like, oh, you meant like now. Okay. So I sent her a summary and she loved it. And she asked for the book. And then I said, that would be amazing. But I don't have an agent. So then I had to go find an agent. And that was a little easier because you're like coming to the table with like half the deal in hand. So it's definitely easier to get an agent when you have that on your side. So it all just kind of went from there. And then I got her some chapters and a better summary, and they bought it. And then it went from there. And I was like, holy crap, I cannot believe I get to write Anna Green Gables. This is absolutely insane. So, yeah.
I think what it does is like it put together your experience with fan fiction, which you may have seen it as like, I'm not selling work, I'm not making money, but it's actually creating like the breeding ground to sell a book,
Right.
So
right.
Every step that you along the way, they add on to get to this place where it's like, look at this,
Right. And my husband, he's so funny because he's an engineer, so he's very science and logic brained, and he used to tell me when I was in my super obsessive beginning romance phase, romance reading, he used to be like, maybe also you should maybe read some books on Excel or something, because I just tried a lot of different jobs before this. And it was like part-time here, part-time there, receptionist. It's like, it's great to add Excel knowledge to your resume. I was like, yeah, okay. And he's like, don't just read romance novels. And then I started writing romance novels and I was making some money doing indie. And he was like, oh, okay, fine. I get it, And then there was that period where I was only doing fanfic. And he was like, maybe you should be working on like books that you could sell and now really just writing for free on fanfic. And I get it's your, release and everything, but shouldn't you be working on something you could sell? And I was like, yeah, okay. And then I got a book deal for something that's essentially fanfic. So he's like, I'm not telling you anything anymore. Forget it. You do your own thing. You know what you're doing.
Yeah, it all makes sense. Like, I know it doesn't make sense at this time, but it all comes together. Like, I don't know, my experience is like, it's just like, it flows. Like, you just have to just keep taking the next right action, follow the breadcrumbs, and it will take you to things you wouldn't imagine,
Yeah, it's really funny how it works out.
So what is your favorite trope to write, and what is your favorite trope to read?
I think, well, my favorite thing to write, it used to be enemies to lovers. But I'm actually sort of drifting a little bit more towards friends to lovers, which is a little bit softer, I think, of a story. And there could be a little bit more denial of feelings, yearning. There can be some miscommunication. But I really like that idea of, knowing someone forever and then realizing that you've fallen in love with them somewhere along the way. And sometimes that's not how it is with friends to lovers. Sometimes it's, all of a sudden it hits you, wow, I would like to date this person. But I really like the idea of them sort of falling in love along the way, and then each of them thinking they're the only one in love. And so, I really like that. But reading, it's still enemies to lovers. I love that. I love that trope. I don't know why. I love it. And the whole, like, grumpy, grouchy meets sunshine cinnamon roll. I love that. So, yeah.
Gosh, yeah. Grumpy Sunshine meets, sunshine. Like, Grumpy Sunshine is like go-to. And if there's rolls in there, it's like even better. It's like added in. I would just tell you one trope that I've found that I'm like so in love with. I hate you, but I want you. Like, I hate you, love. They're married. The marriage of convenience. So it's like marriage of convenience, but they hate each other, and you're like, they're supposed to each other.
Yes. Yeah. Well, it's funny because I just read around the beginning of the year too. I read Casey McClinton's Red, White, and Royal Blue.
Yeah.
Which I love. I love it. And that's very much that sort of enemies to tentative friends to lovers. And in the beginning, it's like, God, they can't stand each other. But you can also see that actually they're really attracted to each other, or at least you see it from the one point of view, telling the story. But yeah, it's I love that trope. There's just something really special about when the character realizes that actually there is a very thin line between hate and love, and they've somehow crossed over it and they don't know when.
I love this. So what has been your pandemic writing? Has it been any easier, any harder? Has it just had to change, or you're like,
Yeah. Well, my pandemic writing has been very tough. My book was due, the first deadline was due last June. So it was like last March, suddenly both my kids, who are teenagers, both my kids are homeschool, working from home. And so that was chaos. My husband was working from home. Thankfully, we're all able to do that. So he's a network engineer. So he was working from home. And at that time, I didn't have my own office. And thankfully, not long ago, we converted a room downstairs and now I have my own office. But I wrote that book sitting 5 feet from my husband as he took Zoom meetings all day. And it was just, So it was really rough from like March to June. It was really rough. And then once I handed the book in the first time, and then we were doing revisions, it wasn't so bad. Because I wasn't trying to think quite as much with him sitting there talking loudly. But then thankfully we were able to move me into an office downstairs. And then it's been a lot easier. lot easier because I have a hard time writing if there's a lot going on around me. And when everybody's home, it's unavoidable. But yeah, I haven't made lunch for kids so much since they were preschoolers. Like, do I look like a lunch lady? Find something yourself.
Oh my gosh. So what are you working next?
I don't have any book contracts on the table right now. Again, unfortunately, that's the pandemic side of it, is delaying my writing, just slowing everything down. And so I am working on getting a few things in for them to look at. But I'm definitely going to do something with culinary world. I've got a background. I actually went to culinary school and worked in the industry for years. So I've always wanted to do something in the culinary world. And I have sort of something in my head with a dynasty, legacy, family, with restaurants and various things. And then my other one is another coming of age story. And I don't know, it may even be classified as a YA, upper YA. But it's sort of my love letter to the 90s and grunge and flannel shirts and Doc Martens. And yeah, so that's the one I'm absolutely in love with right now.
That sounds so good. Oh my gosh. Yes. 90s. Bring it back.
I know. I can't believe it qualifies as historical now.
I can. I looked through them. No, it is not historical. It was only like 20 years ago. Like 30 years ago. I know, but it's still like,
I know. It doesn't feel like that to me.
No.
It's crazy.
Yeah. That's awesome. So what has been a book you read that you can stop rushing about? You already talked about Red Wine Royal Blue, but do you have any book recommendations you want to share to our audience?
Yeah, I would say, well, one of them definitely was what was I saying? Oh, Alexis Hall's Boyfriend Material. And I think there's a sequel coming, Husband Material.
Next year.
Which I'm really excited about. Yeah. Alexis has so many things on his plate right now. It's crazy. But no, I would say The Atlas Six by Albie Blake, who Albie is actually one of my favorite fanfic writers. And she writes under Albie Blake, so I'm not outing her. But she is one of those writers. And this is sort of urban fantasy, sci-fi fantasy. But she's one of those writers who, and I've seen her do it, she can take probably up to 10, 15 characters, write every single one of their points of view. And every single one of them has a different story inside the larger story. And it is tight and it works. And she is brilliant. So she's one of my favorite writers. And then I'm currently reading Take a Hint, Dan Brown by Talia. I've only read her name, so I didn't want to mess that up. I'm reading that right now, and it's so good. It's so cute. It's so funny. So I'm really, that one I'm really excited about. And then there's another one I was going to say. The Roommate by Rosa Gannon. Because
okay.
I going in, I'll be perfectly honest, I did not see how I could relate and like and root for a hero who was a porn star, because I couldn't see how that would wind up with like a monogamous relationship with a happily ever after without sort of denigrating the sex industry. Like, I didn't see how that was going to be balanced. She is so good. She did it. Somehow she did it. She managed to do it. And it is such a good book. So I definitely, and it's super sex positive. Mm-hmm. So if you like that sort of thing, and she also has one coming out or just came out, and then blanking.
The Intimacy Experiment.
Thank you. Yes. And I like that one too, because I'm Jewish and it has a rabbi in it. So I thought that was really cute. So that one's on my list to read. It's
really good. If you like Cinnamon Roll heroes, you'll love Ethan.
Oh, great. Okay, cool.
Cinnamon Roll.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I enjoyed The Roommate so much that I'm sure I would like it.
Yeah, I love this. Tell us where you can find you online.
I am mostly on Twitter and Instagram. I'm under Brina Starler. I just decided to make it easy for everyone, and that's just my handle everywhere. I do have a Facebook page, but I'm not on there as much as I should be. And I'm also on Pinterest under my name. So, I'm kind of, and I just started a TikTok. So yeah, we'll see where that goes. I don't know. Right now it's just silly stuff, but
Yeah.
we'll see. I might talk a little bit about books and various things on there as I get moving.
I love this. Thank you, Brina, for being on the show.
Thank you for asking me. I love being here.
If you enjoyed this podcast, feel free to share with friends, subscribe, rate, and review the show. This is the easiest way to support the podcast. For book recommendations, author interview archives, and other fun book resources and tips, please visit watchrenexblog.com. The Watch Read Next podcast is part of the Frolic Network. To discover new shows to listen and love, please visit frolic.media/podcast. Thank you so much for listening and have a great day.